Hello and welcome to a new episode of One Chord a Week. Today's chord is one that I really enjoy using. I've used it in quite a few of my own compositions, and it's not very common, so you'll be able, with just a bit of study, to give your composition and your progressions a different dimension. It's not at all difficult to understand and not at all difficult to implement in your progressions, so I really want to share it with you. Let's begin. So we're talking about the Dominant Sus4 chord, sometimes known as the 7th sus4 chord. This chord is basically a mellower version of the sometimes overpowering dominant chord. If you notice in your progression, as soon as you put a dominant chord in, that chord really pulls the whole thing back towards the root, and sometimes we don't want that. Sometimes we want to have a progression that's a bit more stable and that will allow us to expand on it without the constant pull towards the root. So the reason that it works so well is also the reason why you see it in styles of music where sometimes we do want longer, mellower progressions. So you'll find it certainly in pop music, you will find it in rock sometimes, you can find it in jazz when you don't want such a strong resolution to the one. You will find it also in the blues, because even though strictly speaking it's not a dominant chord, it can still of course be used in that function because it does substitute for a regular dominant chord. So let's get to it. Let's get into the details. Let's talk about the formula first, and then we'll get into the sound. The formula for the Dominant Sus4 chord is based on the regular dominant chord. So we begin with the root, of course, which as always in these videos is C. That's my root. And then the big difference is that instead of having a major third, we have a perfect fourth. So the perfect fourth, you'll find it 1/2 step above the major third. So in C, the major third would be E, but for this chord we use F. So we have C, root, F, perfect fourth, and then we continue with a regular dominant chord. So we have a perfect fifth, 1 step above the fourth, so it's G, C, F, G, and then we have our minor seventh, B flat, which is 1 step before the root or octave. So in this case, C is the octave, 1 step before that, there's a B flat. So the total of this is C as the root, F as the perfect fourth, G as the perfect fifth, and B flat as the minor seventh. Let's see what it sounds like. And this is the sound of the Dominant Sus4 chord. Now you see how mellower it is as compared to a regular dominant. And we should get into the why. The reason is that when we bring up the major third 1/2 step to a fourth, we break up the tritone. And the tritone, as you all know, is the interval that divides the octave into 2 equal parts. It's 3 whole steps. And the tritone is really the reason why dominant chords are dominant, why dominant chords want to resolve to the root. I'm going to give you a quick example, and we're going to move to G7 now, a regular G dominant chord that, as you can hear, wants to go down to C, wants to resolve, right? So G7 is the dominant function, and the root is C. Why does G7 want to go to C? The reason I'm doing it in G, by the way, is just so we keep everything natural, no sharps and no flats, okay? So G7 wants to go to C, not because it's a G chord, but because within that chord is a tritone. And the tritone is between the B, which is the major third of G, and the F, which is the 7th of G7. You hear this sound, this is the sound that wants to resolve. And how does it want to resolve? First of all, the B wants to go up to C. So we want to go from the third of G7 to the root of 1 of C. You can already hear it, right? And the other note is the F, the 7th of G7, wants to go down to E because it's a 1/2 step below. You hear this resolution. And E is the major third of C. If this confuses you, it doesn't matter, but it's quite simple actually. You can watch this a few times and you'll catch up, all right? So basically I have the tritone, F and B, resolving to C and E of the C major chord. And this is what makes things work as dominants. Now, going back to C now, If I were playing C dominant, I would have that pull towards the root. But listen what happens when I raise the third. Now I have no tritone. Now this chord doesn't really want to go anywhere, or it doesn't want to go as strongly to its one. All right, and so that's the whole idea behind this chord. One more thing you should notice about the sound is that technically we're not either major nor minor. So technically speaking, this is not really a dominant chord, because a dominant chord has to be major with a flat 7. This is not major. After all, behind this F here could be a minor third. We just don't know, right? But because we don't know, we can interpret it as we want. So you can use this, if you want, as a substitute for a dominant chord. It will just lose that edge, which can be a good thing. And now, as always, I will give you 3 fingerings for this chord, and of course feel free to expand on this. As a matter of fact, you should, and probably get about 10 positions for each chord would be a good start. All right, eventually you learn how to build any chord anywhere you want. And also practice this in every key, right? Don't stay in C. I just do C because then you can compare all these videos, and you will learn all these videos in C, and you'll make up your mind about the sound of each chord. Okay, so the first one is very simple, the one we just saw. We play 3 on the 5th string, that's our root, C. Then we play the 5th on the 5th fret of the 4th string, that's G. Then we bar the 3rd string with the 1st finger. This gives us the flat 7, the B flat. And then the little finger will take care of the F on the 2nd string, on the 6th fret. It's a beautiful chord. You're free to play the 1st string on the 3rd fret or not, whatever you want. Or you can just stop here. Okay? This is the first one. This next one has the root on the 6th string, which is of course useful to move things around. And it goes like this: 8th fret on the 6th string, 8th fret again on the 4th string. So make sure you mute the 5th string if you play with the pick. If you play with your fingers, you can just skip it, but otherwise make sure it's muted with this finger. So it's 8, skip the 5th, 8 on the 4th string. Then the little finger will stretch a little bit to the 10th fret of the 3rd string, that's the F, the suspended. And then we play the G on the 8th fret again of the 2nd string. Okay, so the fingering is like this, and it sounds like this. And finally, it's good to have a position in the higher strings, so let's check it out. Again, root in the bass, it's on the 10th fret of the 4th string, that's a C. Then we play the 5th on the 12th fret of the 3rd, G. We look for the flat 7 here on the B flat, 11th fret of the 2nd string. And then we take care of the sus4 with the little finger on the F on the 13th fret of the 1st string. As far as scales go, there are so many options for this chord because the information given by the chord is so simple. It's the root, which of course goes without saying, and then you have a 4th, a 5th, and a flat 7. And there are so many scales that use these notes. Basically all the minor scales, you know, like Dorian and Phrygian and Aeolian, and then a lot of other modes of different scales, a lot of pentatonics, you know, there's so many scales that can fit this chord. But today I'm just going to show you something that kind of falls in line with the dominant nature of this chord, right? With the dominant function. We want to use it as a substitute for a regular dominant, although you certainly don't have to. But in that case, I would probably go with something mixolydian, which is the mode of the dominant chord. And so first of all, I would say probably just the regular mixolydian chord. So over the sound of the sus4, you could use the regular mixolydian scale, which is a major scale with a flat 7. Right? This would be the sound of mixolydian. Now, of course, you lower the 3rd on this scale, and you're into Dorian, and it will work as well. But keeping with dominant, I would say mixolydian. And then keeping with dominant kind of backwards, so starting from the chord. If I were more into a bluesy kind of thing, then I would use the minor pentatonic over it. You see, you can kind of pretend that it's a minor chord or pretend that it's a dominant chord, and both of these interpretations will fit the minor pentatonic. So I would say maybe today record the loop with one of those three positions or all three, and then jam over it with both mixolydian and minor pentatonic. But by all means, feel free to explore. There's so many scales that work with this chord. And there you have it, the Dominant Sus4 chord. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful. If you did, please consider, of course, liking and definitely subscribing to the channel, because it really helps out a lot when it comes to reaching more people and maybe sharing this information with more and more aspiring guitarists. All right, I hope you have a great week ahead of you, and I will see you very soon with a new chord. Bye-bye.